Hey everybody, Jay Ruane here with another edition, the May 7th edition of Feeding Time Live. Along with me, I have my good friend, Seth Price. Seth, how are you doing this week?
It is a mixed bag. We're going to hear in a little bit about the turbulent world of SEO and what's going on with the rankings in the three pack. But, if we talked a week ago, I was starting to think, okay, how can I use this excess time? Can we get reviews? Can we get content curated for our websites? And, what all of a sudden, I sort of woke up and saw something, and it happened both at Price Benowitz and at Blue Shark, where I realized I'm used to growing pains, where more calls are coming in, and all of a sudden we see problems and breakage with personnel or with systems. And ironically, what I am seeing now is almost like reverse growing pains. As things have contracted and staff may be thinner and or processes have to be done differently being remote, I'm starting to see those cracks.
Oh
And
boy.
it's frustrating because, while the call volume is down, it's not down as much as revenue. And we still have calls to handle. And what I am seeing, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is that the quality of the calls is down
Oh,
so that we're
tremendous.
not seeing the widget. You're not seeing in criminal the felony case or the DUI. You're not seeing in PI the auto wrecks. You're seeing random stuff that still could be monetizable. It might be a soft tissue in PI, but when it's not inside that widget box, it takes a lot longer for the front line intake to figure out what's monetizable and what's not. And even when they do, and they bring it to the practitioner or to whoever's going to do your sale, that very piece is much harder to handle because you're trying to squeeze that orange, and yet there's not as much juice coming out. And that's just a very frustrating process.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a problem for the next couple of months because what we saw, interestingly enough, what we saw on our intake team, and we lost a number of members of our intake team simply because we didn't have the volume of calls coming in, and it's hard to justify paying somebody to sit and stare at a telephone. Because that really is their skill set. I can't transition them to writing content because it's not going to be good content. And so it just wouldn't be a wise business decision, and it's tough. With everything that we're going through, is at the end of the day, as responsible law firm owners, we still have to make responsible business decisions, and that's something that's challenging. But what we're seeing is that our intakes are taking longer than they normally do. So you're eating the
That's
resources that you
exactly.
have. And so what we're seeing, even on we don't have a large PI practice, but because of our client base, thousands of clients over 2 decades, we still get those calls, and we usually refer that business out to other lawyers. What we're finding is that we're getting those calls, and they're saying, "Well, I got injured 4 months ago, and I figured now I have the time to call me." And then it's trying to track. Okay, well, how did you get injured? Did you ever get the police report? That type of thing. It's just the amount of
It's
work is just, it seems untenable, because you think you would have the time, but when an intake takes an hour to do, that eats up a significant portion of an intake
right,
person's day.
and it's not like an hour, but like if that what was used to be a 4 minute intake is now 8,
Right.
and the intake itself has an exponentially less chance of monetizing, you're continuing to spend money on staff. And I keep pushing back saying we can't possibly need more intake staff. And where that line is between staffing up to make sure you're not missing the opportunity because revenue is so precious now, while at the same time conserving resources and keeping your burn rate down. I feel that for many of us, the PPP has given us sort of an 8-week period where we can relax a little bit. And even if it's not super efficient, we can staff up a little bit more than we were planning because of this gift from the government. That said, I'm looking what happens when that PPP money is out. And if this turns out to be an 18-month issue where we're not back to our hardcore issue, restaurants are at 25%, bars aren't open. If we don't really reopen society, and this is not a political thing as to whether we should or shouldn't, the fact is we're dealing with the cards that are dealt. that if society is not open and we're not getting that widget back, we're not seeing the normal cases we had before this, then how do we adjust intake? Because it's going to take them longer to get each one and make less. And that's just, it's frustrating. And I'm seeing it's much harder to manage on the fly, almost like growing pains up. I'm seeing it as growing pains contracting because you don't know how to deal with it.
Right, and I think that's part of the problem. You know, it's like what Harlan always says: you don't know what you don't know. And you and I, with all the historical data that we have on our firms, we can't say what August is going to look like. And you know, it's interesting. I was reading an article last night about how restaurant industries are dealing with their PPP money, and a lot of these independent restaurants, you know, the higher end restaurants, are simply saying, we're taking the money and sitting on it. And because as a restaurant, we've never been able to get access to loans because banks don't loan money to restaurants for the most part because it's such a volatile industry. And so we're going to just figure this as a loan, and we'll take it at 1% and we'll use it to build a restaurant in 6 months when the business is back to normal. But for right now, just simply rehiring staff to have them sit and do nothing is a waste of this one opportunity to get a very low interest loan. And I'm curious about your perspective. Is your firm taking the we're going to blow through this money in 8 weeks approach and then on the back end see what's there? Or are you saying we're going to keep going with what our normal spend would be during this time, and on the back end, if we've got 50 or 150 or $200,000 sitting there, or even $10,000, depending on the size of your firm, we're just going to hold it and see what happens in the next 2-month period? What are you guys doing?
No, we're look, we have a substantial burn rate, and we've taken this money and used it, I think, for what the legislative intent would have wanted, which is we're putting people to work. Even so on intake, I have more people there than I can justify. At the same time, it turns out, ironically, it's not like it's wasted time because it's so hard for them to adapt. Working remotely has created certain inefficiencies. They're getting better. So we are taking the approach, look, we had a decent March, and April was not a complete disaster. With this PPP money, my theory is we're going to be able to run these 2 months when it's clearly, and you're seeing the breakage around the country. I'm seeing it from Blue Shark's point of view, crowdsourcing around the country. Even groups like PI firms that have the money coming in, they're recognizing that their intakes are down, that there's going to be a problem going forward. That breakage is coming. So my attitude is I'm going to spend it, get ourselves through these 8 weeks, and then be positioned to sort of, before, if PPP had never happened, we had sort of had our reserves and we were going to ride this out and do everything we could to be in business as long as we could, hoping that at some point the curve would come back up. And originally, remember, when this happened, we thought, oh, it's going down and then it's going to go up. It's pretty clear it's going to be a curve coming back up. So what we're trying to do is basically give ourselves this period of solid, income, artificial income, and then allow, as income continues, to sort of let that smooth it out so that we basically have the longest ramp, get ourselves through the end of the year. Whereas without that, we would have run into trouble in the fall. I'm hoping that what this is doing is allowing businesses to have that ramp that will allow them to be basically continue running. And again, we employ a lot of people, making sure that we keep the lion's share of those people employed.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges that any business owner faces, especially in the legal industry, because it's tough to say. I mean, we do sell widgets in a sense, right? We sell a product that we sell
not in a sense. We absolutely.
Yeah. But the question is where the demand for that is going to be. I mean, for me, as a criminal defense firm, we're seeing a spike in certain areas of criminal defense that we anticipated when families are closer together. It's an unfortunate situation, but it is what it is. But even if the restaurants are at 25 or 50%, we're going to see a significant decline in the number of DUI cases, and that was always our bread and butter. And so the question is, how long of a runway do we have with the PPP money and with the ancillary stuff that we have coming in. I'm lucky because we sort of set ourselves up to have some billable clients that we can continue to work towards. But eventually that stuff's going to run out, and I don't know how long this next normal segment's going to be. And everyone keeps talking about it being the new normal. I'm going with next normal because I think, the next 2 months is going to be one thing, then 2 months after that is going to be another thing, then 2 months after that's going to be another thing. And we're talking, 6 or 7 segments of a couple of months at a time as we start to figure out what's happening with our society.
Well, maybe instead of new normal, not like it's not what we had. We had built, and many people working with us and our colleagues and fans of the show, we've built machines that have allowed us to scale. We basically, we got that machine down, and all of a sudden, the fuel for that machine is not being pumped in. Keith Givens, friend and mentor from Alabama, founder of the Cochran firm, talked about having gas in the tank when this thing is over, and that's what I keep thinking is, how do we do that? For me, we're a diversified firm, but what I have found challenging on top of intake has been, okay, I see huge demand in trust and estates, and I see huge demand in immigration. The sale process in those departments or those practice areas is very different than in criminal. In criminal, you have a court date coming up. You need somebody. They're going to hire you, a public defender or somebody else. And that's definitive. PI, you're not asking for any money. So at some point, on a contingency case, the person's going to realize I have a statute. At some point, I want representation to get that case going. Here, on trust and estates, it's an emotional play. It's not the same, creating urgency. And it's just like we're all going through an emotional roller coaster. The signing of wills is an emotional thing. Good friends of mine have come to our firm, paid us, done the paperwork, and never ended up signing their documents. Yeah. Like, it's just a mental block. So dealing with trust and estates practice, which has a potential to build some business right now, it's not like, oh, you have to be in court in 2 weeks. It's, I'm interested this minute. I'm going to watch a webinar, or I've clicked on a button to speak to you, but I may not make that purchase for 6 months. There's nothing forcing me. And that has been an additional frustration that as I've pivoted, it is not to the same widgets, and those widgets have very different sales cycles. And just like some of our colleagues are talking about taking on new practice groups, which I always think is dangerous, I've been trying to, can I move any resources from one practice group to another? And that could be an entire segment that we do next week, because I have found that extremely challenging. That it is not, you've talked about this before, but if somebody does one type of law, particularly the non-principals, it is very hard to move people around. Plus, getting somebody who does that area of law to accept their help without costing it more time. Because as you know, when you bring somebody in, and that has been an extreme pain point that we should talk about in the future.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something, and really what it comes down to is if you are going to try to move either staff or attorneys, you have to talk about, do they have a passion or an interest in this type of law? Because quite frankly, unless you have that, you're going to resent the move, and that's going to cause friction in the law firm. Because at the end of the day, people behind this, don't see what we're doing. They don't see us making the sausage, and so they don't necessarily see the numbers. And they're just thinking, well, hey, the business is still on, the lights are on, and we're coming to work, so why can't I just do what I like to do, type of thing. And so that's when your company culture, your firm culture comes into play to make sure everyone's sort of rowing in the same direction. And I think that's certainly something that, firms that had a good culture are going to come out on the back end of this in a good space. And if you didn't have a highly developed culture, if you had people that were, departments that were sort of at odds with each other because, PI says, well, we make the big money, and criminal says we keep the lights on every week, and there was sort of an oil and water thing, I think that's going to cause some problems and some tension long term, especially if criminal stays down for a while and PI is what's carrying the load for a while. You're going to see people start to resent each other, and I can see, unfortunately, partnerships breaking up over stuff like that when people start to resent each other, think that they're being taken advantage of. Because when you're in a rosy situation and everything's firing on all cylinders, it's easy to overlook that stuff. But when the trouble starts in the marriage, it's easy to pick on the fact that things aren't necessarily the way you like, and I think that's unfortunate.
Right.
And that's gonna pose a problem for some firms, over the next 6 months as they're dealing with the next normal.
Right. The big firm analogy is the bankruptcy guys, the bankruptcy groups at Big Law. They're sitting around with nothing to do. The partners are then paying them. Right now, they're the most popular guy in the room, and they're going to be carrying the firm for the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
And what makes just to transition this, we're talking about trying to run the firm, and that's hard enough with whatever you want to call it, anti-growing pains, et cetera. But what we're now seeing over the last couple of days, and we're going to bring Nalini in a moment to talk about this, is the fact that in the midst of all this, Google's decided to do a major core algorithm update, and that has affected the 3-pack, which is the money area for many of us. And for those of us that have been playing this game for a long time, that area, and for some odd reason, this recent update has affected the people who have been the stalwarts, the people at the top of that 3-pack, possibly the most in this immediate update. So I'd love to bring Nalini in to be able to discuss this and figure out what exactly is going on there.
All right, so why don't we do that? Why don't we bring Nalini in now?
Well, thrilled to have Nalini here from Blue Shark. It has been a crazy 24 hours. We are seeing things that we have not seen in a long time. Solidly number one players in the 3-pack, all of a sudden disappearing, people bouncing up and down. Nalini, what's going on? What do we know?
Yeah, so as I kind of mentioned earlier in the week on the Blue Shark Facebook is that we saw a new core algorithm update come out on Monday. The only way to really understand what happened in one of those updates is to give some time and then have people who have research seeing what's changed. So exactly like you said, Seth, we're seeing some really crazy stuff happening specifically in the local 3-pack. So we haven't seen any organic changes so far, or maybe there are there, but they're minor compared to what's going on in that 3-pack. We've seen in the last few days, so Monday it started rolling out, some of the bigger markets are experiencing a lot of volatility in those 3-packs in terms of, like Seth said, if you were number one for a very long time, you may not see yourself in the 3-pack anymore. And in place of that, there could be players who you know in your community have never touched SEO, people who have 0 reviews, people who have spammy names. So it varies based on the different markets. What we've done as Blue Shark is I've had my links people actually raise their name because they check rankings every single day, and they've said, hey, whoa, Price Benowitz disappeared, or this one disappeared. What's going on? And so I had to talk with them, and we went through and we actually audited to see which of these markets were hit. And what we've noticed is, it's rolling out. Just like when there's a new Facebook feature and you have it, but your friend doesn't, it takes about 2 weeks. So you may see this happening to you, what Seth has experienced in the last 24 hours, maybe at the end of this week, maybe early next week. The thing I want you to do is stay calm. Because if this happens, it's just showing that, Google has swept wide and far, just like they did with the executive offices. And at the end of those 2 weeks, if not sooner, they're going to fix what they did. They're going to make it more fair, and your hard work will come back.
And that's something we've seen on an emotional level. As a business owner, it freaks you out because all of a sudden what you sort of thought of as your right, what you work so hard to get is not there. We've already seen a couple pop back, which is awesome. One of the things that I saw that was different about this update was that I saw less fluctuation, at least in my world, for organic versus the 3-pack. That seems to be a first as far as the amount of fluctuation we've seen here for the 3-pack.
I think that's fair to say. When I looked back at the last 5 updates, a lot of statistics have come out about that, and they have kind of this temperature. How the warmer the temperature, the more destruction was done. And so basically we saw that the last one before now was January. In January, it was not that crazy. We saw a couple of changes here and there. But the one prior to that was last fall, and that was focused solely on local. And the big thing was, holy crap, we just saw a whole core update that had to do with local only. This, I would agree with you, has had the most swings. So probably the biggest local. They're starting to be more, I would say, confident in rolling out stuff for local only now.
Well, look, confident maybe with a false bravado because, as the person who runs a business on it, you would think that you would not like to see these fluctuations. So, again, the only analogy I could give historically for us older folks like Jay and myself was we saw something like this with exact match domains years ago, Google decided, hey, there's so many spammy exact match domains that overnight, everybody with an exact match domain or keywords in their domain disappeared. And then they're like, oh, damn, you have people who have real websites. Some of the most authoritative ones paid money to have exact match domains. So those that were real came back, and those that were spam stayed out. So it does appear that very often we see a sweeping change, and then Google says, hey, that was too far, and then they put back what they intended.
Let me ask you a question.
And so the big question is, so why is this happening, right? And the biggest thing here would be, we knew why a bunch of Google My Businesses got suspended around June last year. It was because they started to understand what a Regis or a WeWorks office was. They programmed their bot to understand those addresses. So here, this is completely opinion time, but from what I've seen, just in kind of talking to people across the country in the last couple of days, is that I feel that the bigger markets are the ones that have been in that first rollout. So not necessarily just your Atlantas and Miamis, but some of those middle markets. What I've seen is the smaller markets haven't necessarily been touched. And then I have a little bit more, but Jay's got a question here that I want to.
I have a question for you, and this is something that interests me. Do you think when Google runs one of these big changes, they basically say, okay, we're gonna institute a change, and this is gonna impact everybody, and then we're gonna start to allow the algorithm or whatever it is that replaces, start to have the other factors to increase people back to where they should be? So like it's like a blanket, we're getting rid of everybody, and then, oh, now we're looking at local links, and now we're looking at reviews, and now we're looking at content on the page, and that's going to let people to creep back up? Or do you think it's the other way around, where they apply all of these things first, and then they wipe people out? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think from what we've seen is that it's the first of what you said. They go wide very quickly, and they let everyone get affected. And then I think it's a combination of what you said and something else. So one, then the bot starts to correct it, seeing that, okay, well, we went too far, so now let's pull back a little bit, pull back on the reins. But also, I think a lot of when they reprogram after that 2-week period has to do with what kind of support inquiries did they get. So after, June, when everybody started getting suspended, you had all these people slam them and say, hey, I have a real Regis office. I'm just a one-person firm. And so they were like, oh, shit, so I did mess up. And they were able to reprogram that to be fair. So one of the things that why I'm having our links people go through and look at these markets is that we want to give statistics and data to Google to say, hey, look how much is messed up right now. This is not how it should be. So trying to create a whole list of that to give them as one support issue instead of saying, here's this one and this one and this one. Make it easy for Google. But the more you complain, the more Google's going to say, okay, yeah, we understand. Plus having their bot reconfigure.
Awesome. And what was your last point you wanted to make, Nalini?
So the last thing, and the other opinion completely, is that through the years, Google has legitimately has gone from a centroid approach to a proximity approach. And those fun words simply mean that when you used to Google a city, there would be a red pin. And what Google would do to figure out who should be in that 3-pack is who's closest to that pin. So if anyone in your city, the whole geography of your city, looked up personal injury lawyer, whoever's closest to that pin would be the answer that had good SEO. So close to the pin and had pretty good SEO. The problem that they ran into was the pin was city center, it was city hall, next to the courthouse, next to all the law firms. People were moving their law firm there, and Google wasn't able to actually figure out who were the 3 best answers. They had a saturation. So they moved away from that in 2018, and they, through an update as well. And they said, well, now what we're going to do is give our users the best user experience, and we're going to find the person who's closest to them, but also still has solid SEO. And so what we might be seeing right now is that they've reconfigured and they've heightened that proximity factor so that when you're Google searching, you're finding just the closest person with no paying attention to who's done SEO. It's kind of the only explanation that a lot of us have seen, completely opinion, but it might just be them strengthening that. So, at the end of this, it'll be really good in that if you do have good SEO and you have placed yourself in the geographies you want to be, it's going to help you in the end.
Right, and some analogy that Nalini's used over the years, talking about like pizza near me. You want the closest pizza, or a pharmacy. You don't want to go 20 minutes to get to a pharmacy. but lawyers are different and different industries are different. So with a lawyer, the guy who might be down the street from you is some guy who's not really the right answer if you've been arrested. He may have that as part of his practice, but the right lawyers may be 20 minutes away or the best answer. And so what I think Google is struggling with is giving people that proximity while at the same time giving them an answer that's going to be meaningful and not something that's going to lead them down a bad path.
100%. I could not agree more on that, because I think that that's always one of Google's struggles is when they teach the bot something, it's hard for them to differentiate it by industries. And so they have to figure out what's good for each industry, not just, some people. And I've heard people say this with their strategy. If you are a very small town outside of Philly and you're a criminal lawyer, people aren't necessarily just going to look for their small town criminal lawyer. They're going to actually type in Philadelphia criminal lawyer because they want the big city lawyer to help them. That's exactly what I've seen. Yeah.
And I could get cynical. I think that that's what's going on, but I could also get cynical that if you have larger players in markets who generally are authoritative, and all of a sudden they're saying, well, even though you're 10 minutes away, there's another answer closer. What they're doing is they're giving less organic reach, which forces more to sales. And if you look at Google stock recently, it has been taking a beating. They're looking for anything that's going to bring that sales back up. That would be the cynical response to this. Let's assume that they're just trying to figure out industry by industry and hopefully done sooner rather than later for us in the legal industry.
Awesome. I think biggest takeaway would be don't get alarmed if you see that you're hit in the next couple of days or even sometime next week. It's just fluctuating. But do keep track of the 3-packs that you no longer are showing up in. Check every couple of days to see if you've come back. If you haven't, that's important information to kind of have when you want to go to support after this and say, hey, I have some help here that could help you fix this.
Is there a tool that you recommend for checking to see where you are in the 3-pack?
Yeah, so manual searches are the best, being actually in the location. Make sure that you're using an incognito tab, a private tab. If you're doing that, you can do it on your cell phone or your computer. Some of the programs that we use are a little bit more robust, so I don't know that, a one-off lawyer is going to have it, but Bright Local has been very good across the board, and so has Local Falcon, a lot of people use, and Local Viking is actually another one that came out that has even better features than Local Falcon sometimes. But these are more SEO agents.
Those are the geeks. Those are the geeks.
Yeah.
So really, if you're watching this and you're a local person, the key is set your browser as private or incognito. Run your own search and see where you rank.
That's a good first step at very least. Just know, are you gone? And that's the part. The other morning when I woke up and saw several of our solid 3-packs just gone, it may not be perfect, but it's a nice time to sort of say, okay, we have an issue now. We can start monitoring it and using more tools. But it's, if you see yourself back, there's a good chance you're back. It's not the perfect, but it's a great first start.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nalini. Thank you for your help today. We love getting your news. All right, Seth, so now we're going to bring in our next guest. Our next guest is going to be Bill Hauser. We're going to talk a little bit about his role in growing a law firm on the pay-per-click side.
Well, look, Bill, great to have you here. It's been a pretty special couple of weeks. A handful of weeks ago, I was sitting here talking to Jay saying, hey, we want to do something online during this, and we had met you down at NTL and really enjoyed getting to know you. What has happened with the Lawyer Webinar Mastermind series has been incredible. I've gotten more positive feedback from this experience than from any other online presentation I've given by a multiple. What do you think? Why is this why do we have lightning in a bottle here? What is going on, and what has captivated the legal community so much?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And first of all, thank you guys for having me on. I think, so just to step back for a second, about 8 weeks ago, the Lawyer Mastermind webinar series, which we're calling LMWS, didn't exist. It just didn't exist at all. It was not even a thought at that time. And the interesting thing now, 8 weeks later, it is now the largest, I'd say arguably, event series in the entire legal industry, but definitely largest webinar series ever pulled off in the entire industry. we've had speakers. We've had Alexander Shinara on. We've had Mike Morris. We've had Glenn Lerner. We have some other big names that we're going to be bringing on soon. Yeah. Yes. Seth Price, Jay Ruane. It is phenomenal what we've pulled off here. I think the biggest lesson, for the lawyers listening, we've had 14,000 registrants just in the last 6 weeks. I'm measuring just this quarter, 14,000 lawyer registrants for our webinars. And it was just an idea a little bit ago. The thing I want to talk about the webinars is I think the thing that limits lawyers a lot in marketing their practices is they just focused on transactional marketing. How can I spend $1 and get $2? And the risk with that is you lose brand ability. So if anyone watching right now, just look at what Jay and Seth are doing. I mean, Seth is either a moderator or speaker at almost all the biggest legal marketing events nationwide. Jay has pulled off omnipresence branding in his market in criminal defense in the entire state he's in. And you don't pull these types of things off focusing on $1 in, $2 out. You don't. You focus on mass awareness and helping a lot of people as much as you possibly can. And I think that's why it's been a home run is from the get-go. We tried to put on the most helpful, best show we possibly could for our target market. So without going into the weeds as to how we pulled it off, I think what every lawyer can take away is, definitely take a step back and look at how can you make a movement in your market versus a transactional investment.
Something that Jay and I have been talking about has been just the roller coaster of emotions that we're all dealing with as business owners, as with our families, et cetera. And that one of the things I'd love you to expand upon is mindset. What are the tools or tricks that can help you so that the highest highs don't bring you one way and the lowest lows don't sink you? Because I'm seeing that. There are moments when we got our April numbers, we're like, man, we're there. And we're like, but the next minute I was brought down to earth seeing staff and cracks by going virtual. There are moments when you feel like, hey, this is going to be done in a couple months. And there are moments when I think it's not going to be done for 18 months. You do a lot of sort of thinking and meditating. What are your tips and tricks on that?
Yeah, I just think my biggest fear is that, the decisions that some law firms make in this time period are going to go against their 3 to 4 year plan. I'm guilty of it too. When coronavirus hit, I pulled some of my operations budgets. Like we had people helping us build some landing pages. We pulled all these expenses because I was scared. But now looking back, I realized that a lot of the things that I pulled investments on were completely out of fear. And they actually, now looking back, caused more corruption in my company from the perspective of just, overwhelming my team because I wanted to save a couple of dollars on the operation side. And it was the wrong decision. So the biggest thing that I personally, the mission that I want to provide to lawyers is improving belief systems. I write it down every day when I write down my goals. I improve belief systems by pushing myself and others to the edge of our circle of competency. So I write this down every morning because it's important to me. And I see so many small business owners and lawyers just rotate through whatever is hot and just riding the wave of their emotions. Oh, I got pitched this cool new thing from this sales guy. Oh, I'm going to try it for 3 months. Oh, it didn't fail or it didn't work. Point the finger and go, oh man, you're the reason my law firm's not working. No. Oh, another sales pitch. Oh, let me hear. Maybe this is going to be black magic. Okay, I'll try it for 3 months.
You sound like a young Jay Ruane in the sense that we've had this conversation, the fairy dust, the silver bullet. Do you think that people are more susceptible during this time? Because what I'm seeing is sort of a contraction and not knowing where to turn. And I'm just curious, like, you're speaking to people from around the country. Are you seeing this going to dovetail into sort of the next point, which is, are you seeing people doubling down on their current business model, or are you seeing people looking for alternatives as to where to turn?
Yeah. I see a lot of people looking for alternatives, and it's a shame because there's a lot of shysters in the marketing space, right? So there's a big risk. People are some firms who don't have as much overhead are sitting on some good PPP money right now, and they're probably going to get ripped off, which sucks. Because there's going to be all these new things coming out of the woodwork, especially in internet, right? Because everyone's on devices now. Internet marketing is going to boom, I think, over the next 2-3 years in a way it hasn't before, which is crazy to imagine. Even more growth in that sector. But I just think there's so much opportunity to get ripped off. And what I keep coming back to is, and I talked about this in another podcast we did with Jay, like, just understand the psychology of your market and make a long-term plan, put a stake in the ground, and build it out. Build out your intrinsic value of your law firm right now. This is the topic that I keep coming back to. It's like, you can have as much of an emotional roller coaster as you want, but my question to every lawyer is, no matter what you're feeling emotionally right now, did the intrinsic value of your skills, your knowledge, your capabilities, and your law firm actually decrease? Is the value you're capable of providing, did that decrease? And the answer is no. It's an emotional thing. So build that intrinsic value of your law firm with systems, better marketing strategy, triple down on that instead of making snap emotional decisions.
Well, understanding that, but if you're take somebody in Jay's position with a predominantly criminal firm, and then people are saying, okay, I don't see this coming out for X period of time, I want to diversify. Talk to me about paid search. Let's say somebody says, you know what, I did family in a prior life, and I feel like that's going to have some legs. I know the trust in estates is working well now. How can paid search be used to surgically potentially get some cases short to medium term if the area that is your predominant space is really, underwater? Is that something that you can turn on a dime, or do campaigns take a certain period of time so that if you really are looking short term, that it's not, we use the spigot analogy. Is it really by the time quality scores are looked at, and that by the time Google or Facebook understands you, that it won't happen instantaneously? What are your thoughts for people who need some sort of short-term fix?
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction there is, I don't like the word short-term fix ever in marketing, because you'll make bad long-term decisions looking for short-term fixes. So, the whole thing using here's what I agree with as a concept. PPC and SEO are the best twin brothers ever, right? The search term data you get from Google Ads, meaning the results that you get immediately from Google Ads that tell you what keywords produce leads, if you're tracking your leads, freaking awesome for your long-term SEO strategy, right? If you put on a thinking hat there. The problem I see with banking on Google Ads as this last-ditch hope effort for you to turn around your practice, you can't depend on any one thing for that, right? You can't penetrate any legal market, on last-ditch effort hope on any marketing platform, Facebook, Google, SEO, whatever. So, if again, and then it comes down to budget. It's like, are you trying to pull off going into family law on a $500 budget? And it's a gamble. Like, are you going to have a good first month?
Well, that's not even a gamble. That's a poor gamble. It's not like you're saying, hey, I'm going to take $10,000 and I'm going to build this out on the hopes of being able to get, 3 or 4X. $500, that's not going to get you anywhere no matter what.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think, again, it comes back to the concept of when emotions are high and anxiety's high, lawyers can really waste some serious money by getting excited about a concept that's going to turn their practice around, and it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
in our remaining moments, can you look our audience in the eye and just bring it home? What do you want them to hear? How are you going to get them juiced so that this week they can take their business to the next level?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I'd say is make sure you're on our Lawyer Mastermind webinar series. I mean, we are spreading, I'd say, the most positive news in the entire legal space. So protect your attention right now. Do not let the notifications on this thing steal your attention away from your goals, and limit the news. I made a rule, first 2 hours of every day, I'm not opening my computer because I keep gravitating towards my stock market stuff and articles, and it pulls me into a warp hole that's just not a positive place. I think the biggest thing I would say is don't make short-term decisions, especially now. We're past the short-term phase now, right? That was a couple weeks ago. Now it's time, take a deep breath and at least think 2 weeks out. Just start there. Just 2 weeks. Then you can start thinking a month, 2 months, 3 months. But get out of your 24 inches, as I call it, your little personal anxiety bubble, and just look 1 or 2 weeks out. That's all.
Well, look, I hope everybody here joins us on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's been a lot of fun. It's motivational. And just like my early days of going to conferences, I used to get on the plane going home when we did those things. We got on planes after conferences as opposed to turning off our Zoom. And I would always feel like this pit in my stomach because I had so much to accomplish. And I feel like over the years, there's been less and less. I have teams, I'm executing on things, and all of a sudden, that feeling is back because I know there is so much to be done right now if we strike while the iron's hot.
Well, that was some really good information from Bill. There's a lot of great takeaways that I think the people in our audience can benefit from because, we're everything's changing sort of minute by minute, and the more knowledge you have, I think the better positioned you're going to be long term. So, what do you think about that, Bill?
Well, I think that we are on an emotional roller coaster, and the information that we're providing, it has two benefits. One is it can give you skills and items to actually insert, but the second is to know that we're all going through this together. Whether it's a big firm, a medium or small firm, whether you're doing pay-per-click or whether you're doing organic or whether you're doing word-of-mouth advertising, there's always going to be issues. And right now, we're playing in uncharted water. So I hope that the conversations we've had today help people at least put things into buckets and help smooth out those ups and downs because certainly it has been a trying time. And anything we can do to sort of help people get through this, is a pretty rewarding experience.
Absolutely. And so, Seth, I need you to hold me accountable, right? So I told you when this first hit, we were just in the beginning stages of a retheme of our website. Over the last 6-7 weeks, we've been working really hard. I've been writing content. I've been working with my team and that type of thing. And we are so close to the finish line that I am going to have you hold me accountable that 1 week from today, so on May 14th, our new website theme will be live. So that's the commitment that I'm going to make to you live here on the program, and I'm expecting you to hold me accountable next week with our very first segment. You're going to ask me how we're doing. Is there anything I can hold you guys accountable to for next week?
For me, it's been a system to bring reviews in, and I always think that I'm almost there. I want to make sure that by next week we are fully operational, that we are pushing back on lawyers who have for years not made it part of their DNA. This is going to be my week to really push that forward.
Awesome. And I think, we were talking off camera to Nalini before the show, and she talked about having different platforms and having a review of the review platforms. So maybe we could reach out to her and she can give us some stuff next week about the review platforms that are available to all the people that are out there. So if they find something that they can use as a tool to get more reviews, that could be a big benefit to our audience.
That'd be great.
All right, fantastic. So with that, we're going to sign off with another edition of Feeding Time Live. Thank you all for watching. For me and for Seth, thank you so much, and we will see you next week here on another edition of Feeding Time Live.